Welcome to our First Nations Home Energy Save webinar on what to expect when working with an energy advisor. For those who don't know me, my name is Erin Peterson. I'm the program lead for climate and energy resilience at the Fraser Basin Council. And I have my colleagues Daryl and Lonnie here as well, helping out. So Lonnie's kindly volunteered to be tech support. So if you do have any issues with Zoom, reach out to her in the chat and she can hopefully help you out with that. We are recording the webinar, so if for some reason anything happens and you don't see it all, you'll be able to see it later on as well. I'm just going to start with a quick territorial acknowledgement. So I'm very fortunate today to be calling in from the unceded traditional territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and Musqueam nations. And I really want to express my gratitude that I'm able to live, work, and play here on these beautiful lands. If you'd like, you should all have access to the chat at the bottom of your screen. You're welcome to put in your name and where you're calling in from in the chat as well. Just a very quick intro to the Fraser Basin Council and what we do. So we're a nonprofit. We work on sustainability initiatives that focus on partnerships and collaboration. And we work in three strategic areas. So one is climate change and air quality, another is watersheds and water resources, and the third is sustainable and resilient communities. So we do work all across BC now. We're not limited to just the Fraser River Basin anymore. And one of our programs that this webinar falls under is called First Nations Home Energy Save. And First Nations Home Energy Save is a capacity building program working to empower First Nations communities to transition toward energy efficient, comfortable, healthy housing. Since we're a capacity building program, we don't directly fund projects, but we do things like virtual and in-community training. We provide some virtual consulting hours, learning grants, peer networking opportunities, and we have a newsletter as well. So later on, I'll put the newsletter link in the chat if you are interested in signing up for that. And then just going on to the agenda. So we're almost done with the welcome here. We'll start with the speaker presentation. So we have Devon and Mark with us today, and I'll introduce them shortly. After the speaker presentations, we'll move into some time for audience Q&A. For that, we'll be using the Q&A box, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You should have the ability to see all the questions and upvote them as well there. If for some reason you can't find that box, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. We'll take a look there as well. But best chance for getting your question answered is to put it in the Q&A box. And if we don't get to all the questions, we will try to follow up after the webinar. So without further ado, I will introduce Devon and Mark, and then they can take it away. So Devon Miller is a coordinator coach with the new Partners in Indigenous Energy Efficiency and Resilience program. The acronym up there is PEER. This is a new funding and support program for Indigenous governing bodies, which is delivered in partnership with BC Hydro, FortisBC, and Clean BC. Previously, Devon ran the Clean BC Indigenous Community Energy Coach Program and Heat Pump Incentive. Devon brings over 10 years experience to the program, including leading community energy and emissions plans, climate action plans and policies, and high-performance building strategies and supports for local governments and Indigenous communities across BC. And just so I don't have to interrupt, I'm going to introduce Mark now as well. So Mark Jackson is the owner and operator of Flowcasa Energy Advisors. His core focus is supporting Indigenous communities to reduce their home energy costs and realize their energy sovereignty goals and shift towards a sustainable future. Mark is an NRCan registered energy advisor and part of a family business that has been part of the energy efficiency industry in Canada since the beginning. The family business has been delivering energy advisory services for over 17 years and builder services for over 40 years. Prior to running Flowcasa, Mark worked at Deloitte for 10 years, including supporting the Indigenous Services Group, which is now called the Nation Building Group. So with that, I will stop my share and let Devon take over. Did you want me to share or did you want to do it
I can
yourself,
share.
Devon?
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay.
Yeah,
you should be able to.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today, Aaron and all, and nice to see some familiar names and faces on the call. Yeah, my name is Devon Miller. I am one of the energy coaches with the new PEER program, which is short for Partners in Indigenous Energy Efficiency and Resilience. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the PEER program today, just to sort of reorient everybody on the call. And then I'll run through, there's 4 streams of the program offer, but given the focus today, I'm going to focus on the second stream here on energy assessment funding, but I'll lightly touch on the other streams. I'll talk a little bit about the coaching services available through Peer, very high level on the customer journey, and then I'll sort of end on some how to get started and resources to leave lots of time for Mark and questions and answers. So the Peer program is a new program, as we've mentioned. It's one program that was designed to support energy efficient, low carbon home building construction and retrofit work in Indigenous communities. There's 4 key program objectives that we sort of set out to achieve on, was just to support affordable clean energy projects. So the program provides both enabling support and enhanced incentives to plan and implement residential retrofit projects. It introduces more capacity building support, which I'll touch on in a later slide. Second objective is to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions, so to help improve energy use practices across communities. 3, and this is a big one, and on the next slide will kind of make it a bit more clear, but to simplify the incentive landscape. So I'm sure a lot of you have experience in accessing multiple programs. There's a lot of market confusion out there. It wasn't very easy. Communities had to, register in multiple programs to advance their energy efficiency and electrification goals. So we wanted to incorporate feedback that we'd received from existing programs on what works and what is missing in the design of this new program. And then lastly, wanted to, of course, reflect Indigenous perspectives. So there's a program advisory committee made up of Indigenous governing body representatives, so it helped design the program to help enable energy efficient, low carbon home retrofits. On that third objective, a big goal was to simplify the program landscape for residential retrofits. So there's 4 programs listed here that many of you will probably have had some experience one way or another accessing in the past. So there's BC Hydro's Indigenous Communities Conservation Program, Fortis BC's Indigenous Communities Conservation Program, Clean BC's Indigenous Community Energy Coach and Heat Pump Incentive. That's the program I previously ran and where I've met many of the people on this call through, as well as Clean BC's Energy Savings Program. And so all these programs have been integrated, amalgamated into Peer. And so it is a real collaborative effort between the 3 partners. And one thing just to note for clarity's sake is the Energy Savings Program, Clean BC Energy Savings Program, which many folks on this call will have had some experience with, is continuing to operate and is available to folks across BC. But the funding from the Energy Savings Program is aligned under the Peer Programs framework. So we've basically taken everything in the market and brought it into one place with Peer. The program was developed over the course of 2 years. And like I said earlier, we did have a program advisory committee made up of representatives from various Indigenous governing bodies across the province. It took a couple of years. It's quite a lot of content to sort of migrate into one program. But there was a lot of engagement we undertook to make sure the program was going to be meeting goals and objectives across the province. So there are 4 streams of support through Peer. I'm going to talk about the energy assessment funding, but just so folks are aware on the call, there are 4 key streams. The first one is energy efficiency retrofit incentives. So that's things like funding for insulation, windows and doors, heat pumps, water heaters, etc. There is funding for energy assessment funding, which I will spend most of my time on today. But there are also heating system maintenance rebates available and basic energy savings measures as well through Peer. So I'm going to spend a couple slides going through the energy assessment funding. It is not a whole lot to go through. There might be some questions and answers coming later that you might have on these elements. But Peer does offer funding of up to $500 per home for energy assessments or building condition assessments with an energy efficiency and climate component. There's a lot of information on this slide. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards if it's helpful for anyone on the call. But essentially what this is breaking down is there are different types of assessments that are supported through the program. There is a prepayment pathway, which I'll get into in the next slide a little bit more, but folks can access up to 50% of the quote amount. The total incentive maximum is $500 per home for a pre-upgrade EnerGuide home evaluation or an energy efficiency assessment. There are ASHRAE level 2 assessments available, which I'll explain the circumstances of that in the next one. That's eligible for a slightly less amount per premises, which is up to $400 in total per premises, and a maximum of $8,000 per townhome complex. So this is probably a question that will come up. We've based on feedback we had heard through the development of the program, and with the sort of removal of NRCan's Greener Home program, which previously supported home energy assessments, we wanted to fill that gap. So we do support EnerGuide home evaluations that adhere to the standards set by Natural Resources Canada, performed by a registered energy advisor, which you'll learn more about in Mark's part of the presentation. But we also have built in some flexibility. So energy efficiency assessments that are completed as part of a whole home energy asset management assessment, or that is completed as part of an application for CMHC or ISC funding, that generally includes the general physical state of the property, including energy efficiency considerations. So, for example, noting where insulation or mechanical systems should be upgraded, are also supported. And we added that because that was something that was we encountered a fair bit of in the previous programs, and that was requested by communities. And I mentioned on the last slide the ASHRAE level 2 assessments. So that was another area where some Indigenous governing bodies mentioned that in the case of townhouse complexes, they sometimes prefer to undertake ASHRAE level 2 assessments for the entire building as opposed to doing home EnerGuide assessments per unit. So we added that as an optional pathway or supportable pathway as well for the home energy assessments. In addition to the funding amounts, the rebate amounts, I think there's a couple important notes for folks on this call. One is there's now project management funding that is available to support additional staff or to hire external consultants to coordinate this type of work that's happening in your community. This funding is calculated at 10% of the project's energy retrofit funding scope. And in addition to that, there is a prepayment pathway that communities can access. And so that amounts to a 50% prepayment of the total eligible rebate costs based on the number of premises included in the approved application. And that's processed upon review and approval of the application. So these are some additional and new supports that we offered in PEER to sort of better support this type of work in communities across BC. PEER also includes a coaching service. This is pretty similar to previous experiences that folks on the call will probably have had, working with sort of Hydro, FortisBC, or CleanBC coaches. The PEER program coaches are available to answer questions and support through project processes. We aim to provide quick, reliable help, and we're available by email, Teams calls. The email will be added at the end of this presentation. Teams calls, to help you navigate the program, support phasing, discussing how best to go about this work, talk about your community's energy goals and things of that nature. So that is also available through the program. And the last thing I'm going to say before passing it over to Mark is another unique element of the PEER program is the application process. So PEER is administered through an online portal called SemHub. This is a high-level flow diagram of the process. You start an application in the PEER program dashboard in SemHub. Documents are required as part of the scoping. It kind of depends on the program offered and the payment pathway chosen. If you're going through the prepayment pathway, a little bit more information is required. But if you're going with just the rebate model, the work is then completed and the final documents are submitted to the SemHub, which is then reviewed on our end, and incentive payment is made to the community. I wanted to show just what SemHub looks like in case anyone has not accessed this yet. This is sort of a new online dashboard. It's quite easy to use. Applications for any PEER program are completed online through this SemHub, which is called the Conservation and Energy Management Hub. These screen grabs just kind of give you a sense of the type of information we require. It makes it a much more streamlined process instead of emailing things back and forth. And your coaches are always there to help review your workbooks and support your application and make sure everything has been submitted as needed to ensure you get your money when you want. Last slide, and again, these are all highlighted links, so I will follow up with this slide deck, but there's a lot of information online to help you gather preliminary requirements and help scope your projects, such as the workbooks and things of that nature. There's contact information for the coaches, such as myself. You can request an energy coach through the SIM Hub. You can access information about the program from various landing pages to learn more about Peer. And that is it for me. I will now hand it over to Mark, but my contact information is here, and I'll be here for the Q&A at the end if anyone has any questions on the Peer program, specifically to the home energy assessment. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Devon. I wasn't sure if Aaron was going to thank you, but I'll thank you.
Thank you as well.
Okay, I'm gonna just share everything here. Share my screen. Then I'll just make that big. There we go. Okay, thanks, Devon, for setting that all up. I wasn't sure if you're going to go through all of the rebate amounts or whatnot, so I didn't include that, but we can kind of look at that at the end if anyone wants. But just appreciate the opportunity to, share some stories around process that, we've kind of rolled out in other communities. The stories of, the journey that they've been on and whatnot. I've worked in multitude of nations all across Western Canada, been in thousands of houses. Can you see this top part? You were sharing screen? No, there we go. And yeah, I've had the conversations with the people in the homes. I've seen the electricity bills, the gas bills. I've talked to them about the pension, and really just like my mission as the owner operator, the person on the ground is really around reducing that home energy, the costs, just to ensure like members have healthy, sustainable homes, kind of moving forward. And like with this peer program and all these other funding programs are out there, like I haven't seen them this good before, and I think they've really stepped up with this peer program. I won't give anyone a government 100%. It's pretty darn close though, but there's a really good funding and a good opportunity here to take advantage of. This is kind of my overview of the peer ESP Cedar, like the process that like working with Energy Advisor they can go through. This is kind of a 40,000 foot view of everything here. I'm just gonna maybe pause and say like the journey that each community goes on is completely different. Some have a set idea of what they want to do, and that's the plan. Some have a huge housing team. Some have huge engagement with community members. Some just kind of march through and we need to do this and we're doing it. So it's the journey is very different and it looks different all across. So this is going to be a general kind of overview, but generally this is the process that we go through. I won't go through each one right now because we'll walk through that later. You can see that energy advisors can support across the energy. I should have put in quotes since I did that with my hands, but the can is they can. There's additional funding, that project management funding to support across. I'm going to kind of go through two things here. You can see in green there, there's just two pieces there. So there's kind of I just broke it up to basic. Here's the basic requirements from say Peer or Cedar for energy evaluations, and then the elevated part where an energy advisor can support across that full journey. Devon mentioned I should mention what EnerCan is. So there's a few other energy advisors I can see on the call. We're all certified. We're third party, registered with Natural Resources Canada, taken some exams, done some preliminary files, whatnot. We're affiliated with a quality assurance organization. Don't need to dive into that too much, but it's all third party information that's recognized by the federal government. So for this, we'll kind of, like I said, break it up into two. We'll just do the basic one. Like here's what the like a basic energy advisory requirements are. just give me my reports and go kind of thing. So there's two parts to it, the on-site evaluation and then the off-site evaluation. So this is a quick snapshot of the on-site evaluation, and I saw someone from Enercan on here. I know this isn't the complete list of Enercan data point collections, but just a general kind of look for everyone on the call to get an understanding of the things that we're looking at. I broke it up into 7 steps here. Here's the first 6. So this is all on-site. Every single home will be visited that's participating in the programs. So it just starts with measuring the house. What's the square footage of the house on each floor? How much space is needed to be heated there, pretty much. You can see all the things there. How many windows and doors we have. What's the size of those windows? What kind of framing, what kind of, glasses in those windows. So this is all the different information we collect for each and every house. And then step 2, doesn't have to be done in this order, of course. Step 2 would be, looking at the different installations. So the big one, the low hanging fruit all the time is the attic installation. Like, is there any insulation up there? Or is there nothing? Is there enough? Looking at that, looking at the headers, the walls. I'm not going to rip open the walls, but it'll be kind of assumed based on the year built and whatnot, unless it's visible. So looking at all the insulation, recording all these data points. The next part, looking at the space heating. What's the primary heating? Is there any secondary backup, wood stove, baseboard, something like that? Looking at the water heating, what kind of tank is it? Or is it a instantaneous? What kind of fuel is for that tank? So it's really looking at everything here. And then other things, this isn't the full list for sure for Enercan, but other things like the HRV, the solar panels, there could be other pieces to that as well. And then the last part is the air tightness test. So you can see the picture there on the bottom from one of the communities I worked with up north on the coast. I think that one is. This one is the air tightness test, just basically tests how many times per hour you have to heat that house before it leaks through all the cracks in the windows, the doors, the attic hatch. And basically all this information is important because you get a sense of what's in the house, what could we change, and it informs kind of the next few reports, which is kind of the next slide there, and the basic deliverables. And we create these energy models using a program called Hot 2000. And within this program, it spits out kind of 3 reports that will help you think about what you want to do with each individual house. So there's 3 reports there. They're just PDFs, right? So if you have 100 houses, here's 100 houses times these reports. The first one that's part of this basic service is just, this is basic and elevated, is the homeowner information sheet, the HOIS, you might hear it called. You can see all the information there. It kind of gives you a list of all the house details, what's the insulation there in the attic, what kind of heating system does it have, what was that air tightness of that house, all the different data points from the house within this PDF. And then you can also look over to the left and see, where are we losing heat and where is most of the energy being consumed in this house. So that's the first kind of PDF that would be a deliverable. The next one is this renovation upgrade report. So based on, the evaluation of the house and the house as a system, what makes sense to upgrade first, right? Second, third, fourth, we can prioritize that within this document. And you can this would be like a 6-page kind of document that goes through, perform air sealing, like you can see here, do that first and whatnot, right? Every house is going to be different. For example, air sealing might not be good in some houses if there's low indoor air quality and there's like a big, we're just doing heat pumps right off the bat. We might need to just kind of reconsider that. This is just the second part of that renovation upgrade report. And basically it'll show you, if you update your main walls from what they are currently to what they're going to be after, this is how much energy you would save. Well, that looks backwards there, but you can kind of see on the left, like whatever different, here's before and after the bottom right, sorry. So the space heating before, you can see if we change that to a heat pump, here's how much energy we'd use after. There's a whole bunch, another report at the end, and not the whole point of this, but the one of the last deliverables is just an EnerGuide label rating, and it pulls all that information together and just shows you what your house uses energy wise per year versus a typical house of the same size, kind of, that was built in 2015 National Building Code, right? So it gives you a comparison to other houses there. So those are the basic parts, right? So if you're engaged in peers, like, okay, here's your reports. Okay, housing team, go off, go do it. Obviously, I don't think it would be that harsh and rash, but those are kind of the basic deliverables. Now I'll kind of switch over to elevated deliverables, how I work with communities pretty much every time, although it's different everywhere. It kind of encompasses that whole journey, all those bubbles that I showed earlier. I won't go through all this list now. You can kind of read there, but it's really can support right across this whole entire journey right here. It can be all, it can be some. It's kind of however the partnership wants to evolve and work together. And there is that, like Devon mentioned, there's project management. I think you mentioned it, project management funding to support across that entire journey. These are kind of, like I said, how I generally go about working through the community. It's slightly different and nuances in between based on community size, heating sources, and whatnot. But this is generally kind of the 6 areas that I like to focus on as I'm chatting with community. So I'm just going to go through each of these fairly quickly because I know there's trying to save time for questions at the end. So the first part here, engagement and project initiation, right? So an energy advisor, generally starts chatting with someone in the community or with housing, right? And they've heard of a program and we're connected, through another community or through a program like FBC. And it's just kind of having that initial conversation to better understand what's out there. There's so many programs and there's this and that, and how does it work? So it's really sitting down to see if it makes sense and just having that conversation. So supporting housing, kind of get their head around it. And then on some communities, I've sat down with chief and council, presented to them so that, like, they're fully aware of what's going on. It's not housing just sneaking something in the side. So support with that. Sometimes it's needed, sometimes it's not. Just totally depends on all situations. Generally, the next part of this process that Energy Advising can support with, I think this is pretty important. And this funding part kind of goes here, but kind of doesn't, right? But when you sit down with housing, they have a pretty generally decent sense of, how big the community is, what the needs are in the community in terms of upgrades and whatnot. So I think at this point, we generally, the energy advisor can start to think about, okay, what programs make sense based on all these factors and what we're trying to do and whatnot, and start to engage with those programs just to, start the initiation and the application process. Doesn't mean you have to go totally down the whole path with it, but start the engagement, start to understand what's available out there. Then from there, assuming that that's all going good and whatnot, I'm just pausing because it's slightly different with peer. You can do the energy evaluations first and then kind of go about this, but I'll just kind of keep going here as it is. When you're using peer with the energy evaluations, you can kind of build out all the prioritization later. But the other thing an energy advisor can support with is member engagement. This can be, I've done all sorts of different place things. It could just be a bunch of emails. It can be Facebook notifications. It could be open house at the community building. It can be, what else have we done? Zoom calls, Facebook Live, all sorts of different ways to engage the community, let them know what's happening, what we're doing, or it could be nothing. I've walked to communities and to houses and they're like, well, why are you here? What's going on? Which I don't think is good best practice, but every community is different in how they want to address it. The other part is member notifications. It's always nice to know someone's coming. EA can support with building that out and setting that schedule with housing or with an assistant within housing. And then lastly, and this kind of goes here, I think, in this initial engagement is the last thing I ever want, because I hear it when I go into houses sometimes, oh, another evaluation, maybe nothing's going to happen, right? Like what's happening. I think it's important to do some preliminary engagement based on those preliminary conversations with housing and council of what they're thinking, just to get a sense of, are there contractors for, say, heat pumps in our area or remote that can fly in? Like, will they do it? Can they do it under the funding constraints and timing? And just to start that conversation so that it's not evaluations and then a huge gap after. So I think that's generally where we could do this initiation stage. After that, kind of part of that, looking at an energy advisor, we already went through the basic process of here's the reports in a home evaluation and here's what we do. I find it's hard to pick through if you got 300 houses, 300 reports times whatever 10 sheets, like it's quite a bit of work. So what the energy advisor can do is build out like a asset management database. It's not really database. I like to keep it simple, an Excel sheet that lists the homes and all the different ECMs or different things that we could upgrade in the future. And I think this really helps to build up the database that's already there within the community, within housing, or help establish that and helps prioritize without looking at each report and kind of trying to figure out what's happening. It helps prioritize which houses could be done first, or say we've gone in and done heat pumps everywhere. Okay, because we want to have something big and sexy and exciting. Maybe then it helps inform what to do next, right? And which houses have 2 inches of bat insulation in that attic. So let's continue to bring down that heating load and apply for a different program for attic insulation and windows next. So it starts to create this one-stop document that can be used for identifying additional upgrades, prioritizing, and I think the other key thing is applying for other programs as well. Because once you start to get all the information in one place, it makes it easier to access the additional funding. I mentioned picking the right program. I don't think right is the right word, but there's lots of different programs out there. These are just a few. It's great that peers consolidated them for the most part and brought it under one umbrella. It's super helpful just to activate. But I think it's, if you're just kind of just after one thing and we're just going to do heat pumps and that's it, I think that's fine. But I think choosing the right program, you can look at it as, okay, we'll do one upgrade under this program and then another upgrade under a different program. So it's very different. I'll show you an example on the next page. This is just a general summary of these three main provincial programs. The other ones at the bottom are more federal programs, other than a couple of them, but there's a whole bunch of other programs. Every community is, like I said, doing something different. I'm working with one community that's starting with all solar just to bring those electricity costs down. Another community down the road here is doing like super deep retrofits and basically making the renovations net zero, right? And then we'll look at solar after. Like someone's doing just heat pump. Everyone's doing different stuff, but it's not that it has to be we'll just do this one and done. It's using that data from before and applying, getting it started with peer, with the evaluations and that first retrofit, and then building out that asset management plan. On here, I think you can you're probably reading along with me, see these programs are all open, and see the different funding. Peers the simplest. I have another page. The next page kind of shows the benefits and challenges of each, which maybe Devon will send me a text while I'm talking and say I'm misrepresenting it, but hopefully not. But peer is very simple, easy to use. It's open. It's a good one to start with to get that initial home data with the energy evaluations. ESP also good. No EnerGuide evaluations or anything like that. And I have a breakdown of each thing that I can share separately. But so ESP, you can do it individually on your house, or you can do a full Indigenous bulk application. it's a little bit more lift in terms of having to get sign off from every household and account numbers from BC Hydro or whatever utility accounts and first name and last name. So a little bit more work. The last one is Cedar, and Aaron mentioned to also include this because it has very like superior funding, has a lot of really good funding. It does close November 28th. I did chat with them yesterday just to kind of confirm what's going on, what's happening, and it sounds like there will be another submission window coming up again because in I don't know, next year, springish, I would guess. So there will be another application window because that November 28th, it's the 5th today, so be pretty tight to get all. It's quite a in-depth application to kind of work through to get that all organized before that time. Not that it's impossible, everything's possible, but it would be a little bit more work. The key thing for this CEDAR program is the very last point, and it's only for remote eligible communities that rely on diesel for electricity generation. So it's kind of blurry here, but you can see these are all the communities that would be eligible. There's a few nuances that a couple others that aren't listed here can still apply, but 99%, this is the 98%, I should say, these are the communities here. So if you're one of these communities, you'd be able to access this, the CEDAR funding. If you're not one of these communities listed, you wouldn't be eligible for that. And if you want to have a closer look at this, you just have there's the website there on the top right. So we're still talking about, funding and, maximizing funding. So this is kind of the last slide on that, I think. I just not that I need to go through and compare like all these different things, although I have done it, and this spreadsheet can be a lot longer for sure. I've just picked out a few things here, but every program has a little bit different funding for different things, and you can, apply for different things in different places. So it's just, that Energy Advisor can support with understanding the nuances and generally between peer and ESP. They're not stackable in the sense that, okay, I'm going to apply to peer for a heat pump and then I'm going to apply to ESP for a heat pump. You're not going to double down that way, but you could do you could do your heat pump with peer and insulation, attic insulation with ESP, for example. Just going to go read through the benefits of the stuff on the right because I think it's important just to kind of actually work through something here. So peer, besides the fact that Devon's there to help everyone out, that's a benefit that I forgot to include. But simplified funding application and reporting process, it's a light lift and doesn't put too much ownership on housing to kind of get that in. It does include that EnerGuide home evaluation funding so that you can collect all that data and use that data to make decisions. There's that project management funding, right? ESP doesn't have this. Just to help support that execution of the project and all those things we're kind of talking about now. Unless this has changed, Devon, there's still enhanced funding for electrically heated homes, right? So most of the grants or rebates, whatever you want to call it, funding are aligned between peer and ESP. For the most part, there's little nuances between. But right now, electrically heated homes, the funding is better under peer. The other big one is, which I'm really happy that they've added this, is the advanced funding, the cash flow. So under peer versus ESP, with peer we can request an advance, right? So an advance for those EnerGuide evaluations, but then also an advance for, say, ordering in bulk heat pumps, right? So 50% of like whatever that number is going to be. So if it's $12,000 we're putting in central systems, then we're going to get $6,000 to purchase that equipment in advance, and it just really reduces the cash flow requirements, or should almost eliminate it, or I think it completely eliminates it, to purchase that stuff in bulk, and then the remaining cash flow kicks in after, which we'll look at in a second. ESP, I think it's nice. There's a bulk Indigenous application, and I don't believe there's a community funding cap, and it's it's very similar to peer, other than the challenges, which are all the peer benefits, everything that they improved up there. Cedar, like I've kind of talked about, enhanced funding. That's the big one, right? Like these are remote communities, so it's enhanced funding, but it's also more costly to generally develop and renovate houses in these locations. So there's enhanced funding for that, and there's turnkey options, which you almost hand the keys over to the Cedar program. I shouldn't say that because it's not that. There's a partnership and whatnot. But the turnkey options is they're able to kind of manage a project from start to finish, from energy evaluations right to putting in this is the heat pump person you're going to use, all the way to the end. The only challenge is, like I said, you have to be an eligible community. That timing of that detailed application is just something that, just have to work through it. But the funding is better. The other challenge that's not included here, I guess I ran out of space. I would say, I think it's 500K per, or it's right there, $500,000 per year. So it's a slower burn, and fewer homes, I guess, would get renovated per year. Although the 4 million per community is larger, you can do more after, but it's generally a bit of a slower, less homes per year type of program. The next piece here is the contractor selection and installation. So an EA can support with this, having, worked through other communities in the past and seeing different products that people are using and hearing what's going on. An EA would be pretty well versed in hearing about the different options, what's working, what's not, how to go. So EA can kind of, using that data once again from those Energat evaluations, like the initiation is a big piece, and maybe that's all they do. I don't know, depends on what the community wants, is like scoping out the project, right? Like, here's how many propane heated houses, and here's how many electrically heated houses. We're looking at doing heat pumps. So this is kind of the funding we have available. Like helping build that all out, I think is a big benefit of working with the EA. They can support with that. But they can support the whole contractor process, right? Send out an RFP. I've done this with other communities where you sit down and you have the face-to-face interviews with 3 different heat pump companies, or 4 maybe it was, and then with someone from housing, and make decisions and based on fit and whatnot. But they can support with that whole, I probably don't need to go through all this, but that whole process, including just the reporting and tracking of the different rebate applications, because I know it can get pretty onerous on a housing manager that has like a normal day job with everything else going on with members, to add this whole huge project on, right? So this is the last slide. Kind of went through pretty quick there. I think just exploring more at the end, right? I think having been to every house, having engaged with, chief and council, and working alongside housing, and having met everyone, right? Having a good understanding of the journey as it's evolving, and exploring as energy advisors, or should be in a good position connected to other people within this energy sustainability field, and just introducing other ideas as the journey evolves. And it could be more stuff around the individual homes. It can be things like a full community energy plan, building out that vision. It could be focused on new homes and building out sustainable design guidelines for new homes, right? And we just talked about a few programs here today, and there's like all these other programs as well. And I just think it's great that we have this peer program to kind of kickstart at the foundational level, and really kind of make an impact on each member's house through all this funding. So I think that's it for me. I wanted to save lots of time for questions, and yeah, obviously there's my phone number and email if you have more questions that you want to ask. So I'll pause.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. We do have a couple questions in the Q&A box already. So I'll start with those, and then folks, if you have more questions, feel free to throw them in the Q&A box or in the chat. Mark, I know Devon mentioned he'd be willing to share his slides. Would you also be willing to share your slides with the group?
Yeah, I can send them around to whoever.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I can just send them out with the follow-up email because I think I have both sets from both of you already. So as long as you're good with it, I'll send those out later on. Um, so first question in the Q&A is Richard is wanting to confirm that the project management funding from peer can be used to compensate an energy advisor for ongoing support through the peer journey.
I can answer that. And yeah, on the slides, I just wanted to share it. We only had an hour, so I didn't want to go through every sort of rebate amount. But in the slide deck that goes out, just for everyone everyone is aware on the call, there will have like multiple slides that will outline all the offers through peer. I just wanted to note that in case that's helpful. Richard, thanks for your question. There's sort of a short answer and a longer answer. The short answer is that is up to the Indigenous governing body to decide how they want to use the project management funding. That's the short answer. There are guidelines. The longer answer is there are eligible categories for what is considered project management support that is outlined in the program documents. From the perspective of the program, like the reason we've added the project management funding is to support successful projects, right? And that means supporting communities to coordinate things on the ground, but also to coordinate successful workbooks, applications, things of that nature. That's really the goal behind the project management funding. So in your particular case, if that was the project management funding goes to the Indigenous governing body, and they can decide how they want to use it in alignment with the program requirements. So, assuming that is agreed between you or the energy advisor and the community, that would suffice. But I want to clarify that process point that it is up to the Indigenous governing body to decide how to use the project management funding, and that's really the intent, is to support the successful project outcomes.
I would only add one extra piece to that, and it's likely let's say heat pump contractor, installation contractor would want to. It's a partnership between all three, right? And they would likely be included in that. So I don't think it's like, here, EA, this is all you, go ahead. It's a give and take, and it depends on project by project basis.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great answer. I'm sure. I know there's a few energy advisors on the call, so I think that was probably a very valuable answer for all of them. Next question in the Q&A. When you're collecting data and creating the spreadsheet of recommended upgrades, do you also consider electrical upgrades that might be needed to add a heat pump or new appliances? So I think they're wanting to know, like, do you take into account the fact that they might need to upgrade some of the electrical equipment on site in their home before adding those, like for example, a heat pump?
So it's not required in the basic under EnerGuide basic deliverables. I take photographs of that electrical panel and whatnot and look at that. Liability issues, I wouldn't sign off on it myself, but I would address it and note it, and that would be in that asset management kind of worksheet. My experience with other communities is, let's say this is likely a heat pump related question. If we are doing heat pumps, the process with HVAC contractors would to be also, they do their preliminary inspection to do measurements and make sure everything, they have a whole system that they do, and at that time they would also do that. We can apply for that funding in advance just in case. There's some health and safety funding that was related, and there's electrical service upgrade funding as well. Not sure if it's quite enough for electrical service upgrade, but it is looked at. It's a long answer because it kind of happens at different stages, but yes, it'll get looked at before just slamming in a heat pump, for example.
Yeah, makes sense. And then that same person, I think, was also wondering if you take into account like the region that the home is located in when you're doing the selection, for example, when you're suggesting materials for upgrades, do you take into account the climate zone or the how wet the area is, that kind of stuff, or would that be sort of later on past the energy audit stage?
Uh, that would be considered, absolutely, because it would impact also like the design heating load for say that heat pump to work, right? So yes, that would be taken into consideration, and generally it would be in collaboration with the insulator, for example, in that case. And then there's other instances where with that community I mentioned that's doing those very deep retrofits is then yes, we'll look at, okay, how do we make this a net zero home, and what if we're going to renovate, do a deep energy retrofit, what are we going to do to achieve that net zero kind of label?
Great, that makes sense. And then the last question, oh, the second to last question. Um, uh, Similar, like if you're doing a big sort of net zero project, you also consider they're asking about selection of materials to address the carbon footprint. So I think they're asking about like embodied carbon of the building materials that might be used in the suggested upgrades. Just wondering if that's within the scope of what you might do.
Um, that wasn't that could be within the scope. Everything is possible if we're going to look at that. It's not a that ownership, like it's not a huge calculation to do if we want to say here's the type of insulation that we're putting in for all these upgrades and what is the emissions associated attributed to that. It's all possible. It all depends on what the priority of the community is, right? If that's the main thing, and sure, of course.
Sounds
Historically, it
good.
hasn't been done as much, but not never,
Yeah.
not never.
Makes sense. And then this last question is asking about when you're planning for mass home energy assessment. So when you're looking at a whole bunch of homes in a community, what would you recommend as a reasonable schedule and timeline for a large number? Like say there's uh, 50 homes, like how long will that take? And
Um, it would be good, whoever's asking would love to have like a conversation with them to it's very different, right? Like some homes are boxes and like square boxes and there's 50 the same, and so the answer, it's totally different for each house, and like, there's a lot of factors. If I could chat with them, it would be happy to have a quick chat and work through that. But I've done thousands of these, so can move through quite quickly.
yeah, it makes sense. I guess it would depend on many factors. Also, the occupants of the home likely need to provide access and things like that.
Yeah, how many elders are in those homes and how long is each chat with each elder, right? Is a timing consideration for sure.
Great. So this might be more of a Devon question in the chat. For contractors who are looking to support community energy retrofits, what steps should they take to become trusted trade partners with energy advisors or with the peer program? So it's actually kind of for both of you.
Hmm. Yeah, good question. Um, Before I answer that too, I just wanted to reiterate something that I should have emphasized in my presentation, and just in case folks didn't see my note, peer is only eligible to on-grid communities, grid-connected communities. I just wanted to reiterate that. And as Mark sort of showed in his table, there for off-grid or diesel-generated communities on diesel-generated electricity, Cedar is the best program in those circumstances. And so I just wanted to reiterate that verbally. This is a great question. I would say, first and foremost, I think the contractors should, and maybe this goes without saying from this question, but like develop that relationship with the community, I think is the first and foremost, most important first step before developing a relationship with peer or energy advisors. From the perspective of peer, we do not, some folks on the call might be aware of the Home Performance Contractor Network, HPCN. This is sort of a pre-approved list. If you're accessing Clean BC Energy Savings Program, you have to use a verified contractor from that network in order to access funds. With peer, it is recommended but not required to use a contractor from the HPCN. The reason for that is there's some parts of the province that have less access to such contractors, and folks might have good relationships with contractors. The reason I bring all this up is to say that if a contractor is keen to develop, I'd say, a relationship, as you put it, with the peer program, I think that's a good avenue to go, is to get on that list if they're not already. And additionally, I meet with contractors all the time. They reach out to the Request an Energy Coach or the program email, and we meet all the time to kind of go through the program and expectations and things of that nature. So I'd say those are two good avenues to pursue.
Should I add? I don't, not too much to add other than it's like all the communities are connected somehow, or I guess I hate calling myself a consultant, but for lack of a better word, the people supporting the communities, we're all connected because there's so many different ways to support the community. So it's, connecting with people like Devon or myself that are kind of in that ecosystem. But I think, like Devon led off with, it's like there's, without a contract sitting there waiting and responding to RFP, it's just having those conversations with community and just adding value in advance, right? Like taking the time to have the conversations with the community, which goes without saying.
Great. Thanks so much. Looks like we actually only have 1 minute left. I know that a couple of folks put your hand up, but then I somehow lost you in Zoom. So if there are further questions from the two folks who have your hand up, quickly try and throw them in the chat if you can. Otherwise, we'll start to wrap up. You can also email me later if you are one of the folks with the raised hand. Sorry about that. I don't know why Zoom is causing me trouble today. But I just want to say thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Devon. We really appreciate you taking the time. Yes, we will be sending out the slides. And Mark and Devon, would you be okay if I share your email address as well, just in case folks want to reach out?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
mine's on the page there. I can text, phone, whenever.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we did
It
have
might as well.
somebody in the chat.
Sorry.
I think Slade from Squaw First Nation was interested in chatting more about peer, so it looks like Devon replied to him as well. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come out and participate. Thanks again to both speakers. When you close the webinar, a survey will pop up in your browser. If you can fill that out for us, we always like to hear what people think about our events. But otherwise, have a great day and enjoy your lunch. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.